fix this. We'll wait till as people get on. All the different platforms here. Is that better? It's terrible.
Well, I couldn't look any worse, so
stop.
It's okay.
You look great. You look great. Don't be silly. Okay. Here we go. All right. So let's dive in. So as I said, we're here to talk about connection. Specifically, we'll look this way, how to create it in your marriage once it's been lost. So I think we'll start with just talking about what connection really is, just to provide a context for what it is that we're talking about, and we'll go from there. So when we're talking about connection, we're talking about the feeling of, being bonded. And it's the thing that everyone's chasing in the dating world when they're, as they're dating, or people who are dating with purpose anyways, they're wanting to be bonded. They want to feel important to one another, right? Someone said to me on the phone a couple of days ago, she said, he just said all the right things. She's talking about her husband from years ago, because he basically would say to her, like, you're so beautiful, you're so important, I want to spend so much time with you, all of that, right? And a lot can be accomplished in a relationship from that place, right? So when people are wanting to really spend time together and spend time with you, that's huge, because feeling connected is really about feeling important. It's about feeling important to one another. But when I ask this with my client groups and ask, well, what does it mean to feel connected? 100% of the time, and now I'm giving away my secrets, but 100% of the time, all of the women talk about how they feel connected. So, I want to feel important to someone. Almost never do women talk about how to make somebody else feel connected. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Connection is also, like in a married situation, it's also about communication that goes beyond just those logistics, right? So, I think when we were talking about this, you said things that you can talk to the house manager about.
You should always clear things with the house manager. That's me.
Yeah, right.
Like, obviously.
But it's true, right? Like, so, and then what happens is, especially for people who are running kids in, different directions for 20 years, and they're working, they're rushing home, taking someone to soccer, someone else has hockey practice or whatever. And then it ends up being that there's no time, or you don't make time to keep creating connection. And instead, conversations revolve around the family calendar, the schedule, who's going to get who, where on time, and that sort of thing. And then what happens is you end up going out for date night or something, and you sit and stare at each other and feel awkward, because if you say, okay, we can't talk about the kids tonight. And then it's like, oh, what do we talk about then if we're not going to talk about the kids, or we're not, right?
Well, there's the weather.
Yeah, right?
Talk about the weather.
Exactly. and it's true. So people end up feeling really disconnected because they've lost the parts of themselves that they feel important. They're no longer sharing those with their partner. Another big thing about connection is the idea of having joint goals. And so what I always talk about is a future that feels good. So when you're married, or even if you're not married, this applies, but certainly within a marriage, there needs to be a vision of the future. There needs to be something that you're trying to create. And it's not about never being happy with now. It's the opposite. It's about being happy right now on your way to the future that you both are excited about. So that's a huge thing with a couple, when they stop planning their future, when when the future just seems bleak. And often when people start to feel disconnected, that's the first thing that goes, is because they start wondering, well, I don't know, do I even want to be with this person in the future? But they don't want to talk about that. And so it just gets, and then that ruins the connection even more. So it gets harder and harder to feel good about the future. And it gets harder and harder to plan one with that person when all those hurts build up, and we'll talk a bit about that too. Of course, connection is about partnership. It's that togetherness, always. And most importantly, it's that idea of being seen and known and feeling understood and feeling like it's safe to be yourself. So you can screw up and you're still loved.
Well, that's very true. The idea of being safe at home is a big one. I can relate to. It's just if you can't feel safe at home with your partner, then where can you feel safe?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then how do you show that vulnerability? How do you show, that love that you really are looking for in the partnership there? So I don't think your partner should make your home feel unsafe.
Right, of course. So, and we were talking before, and you were talking about how, as a man, it's a little bit different. Like, connection's a bit different because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were talking about that society kind of, and I don't know if I'm sharing your secrets or whatever, but
there's no secrets, so everybody knows this. And especially those gentlemen with the gray hair here, so they can relate to this one. So it's like we were taught not to show too much emotion, to be very stoic, very the tough guy kind of persona.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that kind of made us think that we don't show emotions. We shouldn't show emotions. And that led to a misunderstanding about how we should communicate with our partner. It's okay to have emotions. So it's okay to show some vulnerability, as long as you don't show like the triggered kind of way of doing it, I guess.
Like
so it's just like yes, right, toxic. I don't really care for the word toxic, but the okay, we'll use it then for now anyway, because I'm live on TV. I can't say TV. Anyway, I'm so old that it seems like TV. So here we go. Anyway, so it's tough for some of us to kind of show our vulnerabilities. It's tough for us to express ourselves. It's even tough for some folks to understand what emotions are bubbling up inside of them. And then if you can't even understand them, you don't have the words for them, how are you going to communicate them? So it's really good if your spouse is a safe, calm, understanding space for you to kind of work through those things. So that's a very necessary thing in order for this to kind of work.
Yeah, and I think that what I have found and what's a lot of men will talk about is that sometimes women don't make that easy. And I will say, so just as society, as teaches men, I feel like it's getting better. Maybe in a few generations it'll be better. But just as society teaches men that they need to be a certain way and to not have as many emotions or not express them the same, I think society also teaches women that we're responsible for how our husband feels, and we're responsible for their emotions. So that energy between, in a couple it's often reciprocated without us knowing it. So it's that idea that if you feel like I'm responsible for the household and I'm responsible for everything, and I feel like that too, well, then basically we're in agreement. Even though I might think, well, I don't want to be responsible for how you feel. That's a you thing. But for a lot of men, that's never been demonstrated to them. They've never been in a home, because things have evolved and changed in homes. So they maybe didn't see their dad express emotions in a healthy way. It was rather kind of, be quiet and be seen and not heard and all of that kind of thing, right? And so, and the man is the leader of the home and blah, blah, blah. And then all of that has changed, but we're all learning as we go what it's supposed to look like now. So anyways, back to the point around the connection piece. Sometimes, all the time, both the man and the woman in a relationship, or if it's two women, two men, whatever, everybody is responsible as that connection starts to disintegrate. And, I think that whole idea of men not being as safe to be vulnerable is exactly what leads to that toxic masculinity, because like you're saying, then men hold their feelings in, and they end up expressing them as being kind of overly controlling or super angry, really negative. And of course, as a partner, that's really, really hard to live with, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I think a lot of us don't have a good kind of grip on what a healthy way to express some of those things are. So that's kind of tough. And just kind of leading back to that safe environment that we were talking about before, too. So it makes it even harder if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel understood, if you don't feel like the other person's listening with the intent to kind of love you and make things better. Like if they're just trying to make their own kind of situation better, but not considering you in the equation, I think. So I think it's important to kind of communicate that stuff that, hey, I want to make our lives better, you know, because it's just speaking from the not so toxic masculine point of view. I think I'm not as toxic
You're the opposite.
as possible.
You're not.
But, well, I hope not anyway. So maybe in my youth, I might have been a little bit worse off. But I think it's important to create, it's overused, but that safe space is a very important thing that we need to really consider here. And that a good conversation. So I think the ladies kind of will relate to this one, that the man probably isn't the best communicator in the world. And that we may just kind of say, oh, I'm fine. Or, no, I don't need anything from you right now. But I think you do. And how would you say that, how would you kind of draw that out of me, that I need to communicate something? I need to say, I need this for my happiness.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's park that for a second. Yeah. Let's park that for a second, just because I want to talk, because you're kind of skipping ahead, which is fine. But let's I want to talk first about, before we get into how to fix it, because I think that's a good question for how to fix it.
That's a typical man thing. We want to fix things. We want to get to the heart of it.
That's right. Absolutely.
No, I don't listen. I just fix things.
That's right. Absolutely. So, but before we get into how to fix things, I think we should talk a little bit about what destroys communication. So we talked, or connection. So we talked about what connection looks like and why it's different for men and women, or the challenges between men and women are different when it comes to connection. But I think it's also important to look at what actually destroys connection. So one of the things that we see often, and certainly with my clients, is that when you aren't wanting the best for the other person, that is where connection starts to spiral down. And this shows up every day in marriages in really small ways. So I liken it to kind of like paper cuts to a relationship, right? And this is why so many of the clients who come to me, they've been married for 25 years, or many of them 35 years, and they've experienced these little paper cuts for the past 20 or 30 years. And now their marriage is about to bleed out, right? Like it's that death by 1,000 cuts idea. And when it really comes down to that, not focusing on the other person, not wanting the best for each other. And it's easy to get there. As I said, if you're running kids in different directions for 20 years and everybody's busy and life is crazy, and we start, these resentments build up, these hurts happen and the resentments build up. And that's where you start that race to the bottom. So that's where you start to hear yourself and your partner say stuff like, well, why should I have to XYZ if he or she doesn't have to? So easy examples around that are, saying thank you and what we expect from the other person, because, and it's true. A woman will, and I'm being very typical here, and obviously everyone's in a different situation, but typically, women will tell me they will make supper for 5 out of 7 nights a week. And if their husband, helps with dinner one night, then he might be upset if he didn't say thank you. And the woman will say, well, I don't get a thank you from, I make supper every night for the past 25 years and nobody thanks me. Or, I drive the kids around, but if he takes them to where they need to be, he wants me to thank him, or that kind of thing. And so it always is about that race to the bottom where it's like, just because he's not treating you the way that you would like to be treated doesn't mean that you flip it around and then you also start treating him poorly. And this is a typical thing that people do, couples do, and it really is a race to see who can be the bigger jerk in the relationship. It's true. And I see it all the time, and we joke about it all the time in Relationships Redone because, and everyone thinks it's funny, but it's one of those things that it's funny because it's true. We all have these examples of times where it's like, well, he didn't do that, so why should I? Or she didn't do that, so why should I? And other examples are around that I hear. I've actually heard a lot of this lately is where their partner isn't planning date nights or isn't being romantic. And so then she stops planning because she says, well, excuse me, if I don't plan everything, nothing happens. So I give up. And really, again, what is that about? That's about, I want to feel important, right? You're not planning anything. Now I don't feel important. Now our connection is weaker. So now I'm going to stop planning things because I'm hurt. And then it's harder to, the more hurt you are, the harder it is to be vulnerable. Because every time you try a little bit again, it's a vulnerability that has to come out. And connection requires vulnerability because that is the essence of what connection is. It's being safe to be vulnerable. So, and we'll get into the fixing it part, but that's a huge piece around that.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that one wholeheartedly. So coming back to the 1,000 cuts idea too, I think that's why most marriages really fall apart is like, one dig after another, after another, and you may not realize that you're doing it to the other person and they're doing it back to you, but after a while it kind of builds up, right? Mm-hmm. And you're, all of a sudden you're kind of feeling resentful about these little things that shouldn't cause that major kind of feeling, right? So anyway, the big part of it there for me that kind of comes up is not feeling as masculine as I need to be in the relationship in order to be a good leader from my kind of side of things too. So,
but yeah, and that's what you're talking about is that masculine, feminine energy piece that we talk about all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I teach about that too, but that's what you're referring to. And women, we do that. We, and I don't want to use the word emasculate, but that really is what it is. But many women will sit in a very masculine energy, because we have to be in a million areas of our life, right? So if you're working, you have to be driven, you've got to get stuff done. That's a masculine energy that you have to bring to your day. Mothering is another form of, believe it or not, counterintuitive, but mothering has a masculine energy to it because it's about, I'm getting this done, I'm organizing this, I'm getting the kids here, there, everywhere.
Taking charge,
right? Exactly. And so then, though, when both people are in the relationship are taking charge, or when the woman tries to take charge that way, it becomes almost like parenting, right? It becomes, well, I'm going to tell you what to do.
That always goes over really well.
So. Yeah, right. Well, that's exactly it. Because I don't like being told what to do either.
Yeah. And especially in a parenting tone.
Yes.
Too, right? So it's just, if you really want to emasculate your husband, you parent him.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And that's not going to help anybody. It's certainly not going to make you feel closer. Not going to make him feel closer to you, that's for sure. Because like how romantic does he want to feel with his mom? Yeah,
that's exactly right. And there's actually scientific research around that. I won't bring that up right now, but it's very interesting. But yeah, so, and just to finish that piece off though, so just as you said, it makes you feel emasculated or whatever the word was that you used, or parented. And what happens to women, because the same thing goes the other way, because I have lots of clients whose husbands kind of parent them, parent their wives kind of thing. And for women, what that does is it makes you feel small and insignificant and not good enough, right? And so again, this gets back to what destroys connection. When you're making your partner feel like they are not good enough as they are, you are working actively at destroying the connection between you, right? So when you think back to those times when you were the most connected, it was when you were giving each other the benefit of the doubt. It was when a lot of those little things like, oh, he doesn't plan date nights, but that's okay, right? Like a lot of those things early in the relationship are much more kind of whether you want to call it swept under the rug, or you ignore them because you're focused on all of the good parts of the person, which is a really great way to stay in love, by the way. In the relationship, when you're doing the right things, when you're building the connection, you're not doing that. It's after the hurts all show up that you start to do that. You start to attack, blame, tell them what to do without any of the love isn't showing up in the way that you're approaching one another.
Yeah. I think something, since we're here talking about what the men's kind of point of view on things are, it's important to, I want to bring this up a second ago, but we're not all that complicated, really. You know, there's certain things that we kind of strive for in a relationship. Like when I come home after working or whatever the case may be, you know, I made a little list here. So peace, sex, food, fun, safety, and respect. And those are some key elements to making this man thing here happy. And if you can kind of work towards achieving some of that for him, I think your life would be a lot easier.
So say them again. Peace,
sex, food, fun, safety, and respect. And, you know, you're
saying those are the things that for you help build connection for you.
Yeah, and it keeps my masculinity intact. It keeps my power intact. I'm not saying power in a bad way. I'm saying as just a human being, like feeling, you know, good and secure and happy and whatnot in my life over here. And then the other things are fairly obvious, I think. So
yeah, and
peace though, that's a tough one if you're in a bad spot right now. But I mean, maintaining peace is like just kind of peace of mind and peace in language, and obviously if things are kind of worse, then, you know, making sure that you're having a safe household too. So
I think that's a really good point though, because what you're talking about there, like you said, it's a simple thing, but it's something that the simplicity of it is exactly why early on in the relationship things are easier, right? Yeah. But you know, and again, I was talking to someone today, and I said, you know, we're not robots, right? So when we can't be expected to maintain our own alignment with our, you know, that our source energy. I mean, I wish that were the case. I wish we could all just be perfectly in alignment with our source energy and feel that inner peace all the time and be able to just put up with everything. But that's not the nature of the human condition. So having those simple things, which they really do feel very simple. Peace, sex, food, fun. What was the last one?
Safety and respect.
We're
going to have to come up with the cool acronym for you.
Yeah, right. Those things, they're simple, but if they're so simple, yet so many relationships are lacking them. So they're lacking peace because people are yelling at each other, attacking each other, blaming, getting defensive, doing all of those things. That then affects the sex life, of course, because one or both people lose a lot of interest in sex when everything is chaotic and non-harmonious in the home, which obviously, you know, that's a peace thing. It also has a huge impact on whether or not you feel respected, all of that stuff. And then the food and fun part, I mean, that's the basis of our society is that's how we all connect. That's how we connect as families too, right?
Yeah.
Is that being able to have some lightness and joy and happiness and you know, eating together, spending time together, laughing together, all of that stuff. Okay. So just because we're running out of time, I'm going to skip over here to the what to do once connection is lost. And I think this is obviously the most important part. So first of all, if the connection in your relationship feels weak, the most important thing you can do is to approach that issue with love. And unfortunately, it's the opposite of what most women do. So most of the time, as we start to feel less connected, we start kind of complaining about it, or we start expressing to our partner how unhappy we are and kind of blaming them that, we are disconnected. That doesn't work for anyone. Right. And it's, again, it's the nature of how we destroy our own relationships, because we see a problem or we feel a problem and then we focus on the problem instead of focusing on a good solution to it. And so a much better way to approach this is, well, first of all, whatever you focus on grows. So if you're going to focus on your lack of connection, you are going to continue to see a million ways that you guys are disconnected. If instead you start to focus on connection between you, you will start to see how you are connected. So first of all, I would say disconnection is not even real anyways, because, from a spiritual standpoint, we are all connected. But if you have two people who have lived in a home for 5, 10, 35 years, you're connected, okay? And obviously what you're looking for is emotional connection, but the more you can recognize, the more you can look around your home and realize what you've built together, the more you can look at your partner and realize how much you know him or her, just simply because of the length of time you've been together, the fact, for many of you have children together. Those connections are real. Those connections are way more real than the lack of connection that you're focusing on. So that's number one. The second thing, as I said, is the idea of always approaching this with love. So that requires you to get vulnerable. So as I said, a lack of connection is about a lack of vulnerability, because the more hurts that pile up, the more we put up walls around ourselves, right? So it's that brick by brick. We build a wall around ourselves, and now we're not trying. Now we're not open to the connection anymore because we're worried that we're going to be rejected. And sometimes you have to look at that and realize that in many cases, you're living in this state of constant disappointment with your partner because you don't want to reach out because you're scared you're going to get disappointed. So you live in disappointment because you're worried you're going to be disappointed. It doesn't make any sense, and it never is going to solve the problem. So if you start to focus on connection and you start to focus on allowing yourself to be vulnerable and knowing that it's not going to make things worse, right? And with that said, to focus on when you try, so when you reach out, that the response you get might not be exactly what you're looking for. In fact, it probably won't be, because these problems have been created over a number of years. One night or 2 weeks of trying isn't going to solve everything, but it's going to take you closer to connection than where you were without trying. And one of the things that I think is really important, like I said, if I were to ask you what makes you feel connected or what is connection about for you, your answer is, for many women, it's about, I feel important. When I'm connected to somebody, I feel important to them. So I want you to try, if you're trying to fix connection with your partner, I want you to try to flip that around and think to yourself, what would make my partner know that they're important to me? And this is huge. So that's number one. The other thing is to even ask the question, what do you need from me to help you feel happier here?
Well,
right?
Wouldn't that be a nice question to ask? I don't know too many people that ask that question.
Exactly.
So they go into the situation and it's like me. But I think, and this is kind of one of the rules that I have in my life. It's like treat others as you would like to be treated, and at the same time, in this situation, put yourself in that other person's shoes. What would make them happy right now? And you probably can't read their mind, and you've been probably struggling with it over the last little while. So ask.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the guys are going to have problems answering that question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I can hear all the women out there saying, if I say to my husband, what can I do that would make you feel happier right now?
Nothing.
Yeah, right? So that's what they're exactly. So that's what they're if that's going to be what they say, so what's she supposed to do then? So he says nothing, I'm good, and he doesn't want to talk about it.
I think it's part of it's going to be in how you ask it as well. So I think we have to approach it with the idea that we're here to really. You don't want to do it when he's watching the game, okay? Don't do that.
Oh boy.
Okay, so
Here we go.
like seriously though, but I mean, it's just say, hey, this is important to me, and I'd really like to know what would make you happy, and we can look at it in a short term and long term way. Don't phrase it the way that I'm phrasing it right now. Do it your own way that that you can communicate with your partner better. But like for me, if I hear these words, what would make you happy and fulfilled in life, and what can I do to kind of make that happen for you? I'd be like blown away.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
yeah, it's that idea of what can I do to support you? What can I do to make you happier?
Yeah.
And what it does, I think, that question, and I've seen this work many, many times with my clients, what that does in their relationship is it just softly opens up the conversation, right? It opens up the idea that we're in this together. So things might not be great right now, but we're in this together, and I'm not blaming you for the problem, and I'm not asking you to do anything to fix it. I'm asking you what I can do, what part can I play in helping create more connection in our marriage and helping you feel happier in our relationship.
Actually, just on that point there, just before you probably going to sign off, it looks like.
Yeah, well.
But I think it's important to kind of mention a couple things. Is make sure you get rid of the blame game. Get that out of there. And then also there's another important one too. So I think that a lot of people have expectations. So like you mentioned the date night. I expect him to plan date nights. But if he doesn't plan date nights and he never has, why are you expecting that? But you're good at it. But he goes on the date nights when you plan it. Man, come on. Come up with a solution.
That's a good point, because what that's about, and that goes back to the safety in the relationship. And actually to even this Kolbe stuff, which I've talked about before, which is all about how your brain works and your conation. It's great. It's Kolbe, Kolbe, if anyone wants to look it up. But it's really important, because sometimes just a personality or the way someone's brain works is just different. And when you love someone and when you're creating a safe, harmonious relationship with someone, you allow them to be who they are. And in some cases, that means that they're maybe not a planner. And so you just accept that about them. And instead of turning it into something that's hurtful and telling yourself a story that, oh, this means he doesn't love me or I'm not important to him, sometimes he's just not a planner. And, now don't get me wrong. There's also guys who are jerks too. I totally agree. Like, don't come at me out there telling me, that I'm not telling you just to accept bad behavior. But there's a discernment factor there where you start to be able to see how much of this hurt that's coming from this lack of connection is about the story I'm telling myself about my partner, as opposed to the truth about how he or she actually feels. Okay, but we are over time as usual. Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm just going to sign off the way that Sherry would hate me to sign off.
Oh my God. This is something I'm never going to accept.
It's love. It's love.
Okay. Bye, guys.